once you get to know it with the help of the magic of a Pegasus device.
Could we have a round of applause, please, for TheLostNarrator who made that video? In one night.
Yeah, in about 3 hours.
That was a 3-hour thing last night until 2 a.m. It was amazing.
Okay, so who here has heard of any of us? Who here has heard of any of us who are scribbling? Alright, we've got 2 hands, fantastic.
Good, we're doing good here.
Great. There'll be autographs after the show. Alright, so I'm DeadlyReg, and I'm doing most of the talking for the moment. You may be wondering to yourself, who are these people that we've never heard of, and what gives them the right to tell us about My Little Pony? And that is an excellent question. So the fandom starts back in 2010. Laura Faust, this is going to be a little bit of an overview of the fandom, and because you may notice there was a lot of stuff in that video which seems rather inexplicable, given this is a children's show about colorful horses. And part of the reason why this fandom creates inexplicable material is because it's kind of weird, and not just in the fact that I'm 30 years old and I watch a children's cartoon. It's more that the fandom makes stuff that doesn't have anything to do with the show, but would still carry some kind of relevancy to the fandom. So I'm going to briefly go over the start of the fandom, and then I'm going to hand it over to each of my colleagues in turn. Joining us is a surprise guest, itsannachloem from the internet, who you might have heard of, who's going to be here to talk to us about what it's like to be a VA in the fandom. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask them at the end, and I'm sure we'll probably know the answer. So, the fandom starts back in 2010. Now, the show creator Laura Faust used to spend a lot of time on the website 4chan, particularly on a board called Co, which was comics and cartoons. And she had a fairly decent working relationship with the people on that board. They would talk about material that she was working on, shows that she was working on, and they talked to her over a DeviantArt. And that's quite important for the start of the fandom and where it ends up going. So one member of Co spotted My Little Pony launch back in 2010 at German Toy Fair. And when the show was first aired, he ripped it off the television, he uploaded it onto YouTube, and he shared it on the Co board. And it became fairly popular quite quickly. But it became popular in kind of an ironic way, where people were just posting pictures of spinners, but posting pictures of ponies just because they could, making a joke out of the fact they liked colourful horses, basically doing it to be very, very annoying. But that ironic start led to something more of a sincere body of work that's come up afterward. So the ironic start though is important because, again, I'm going to get to that in a second. So then it's getting a new board on 4chan. 4chan is very exciting to going to skim over it because 4chan posts a lot of dirty pictures. So
it's 4chan, you know.
PG-13.
PG-13, yes. We got to say PG-13.
Yeah, PG-13. Yeah. Laura Faust had a lot of, had a close working relationship with the fans, particularly they would talk to her, she was a showrunner, they would ask questions about the background of the show, background of the characters, background of the world, and she would start answering those questions and providing a depth that she clearly considered. So the show had a lot of hidden depth to it, that if you ask, they had been considered and had been created, so it did exist in the series Bible to influence further work, so people started going crazy over it, started to involve it in their own work. Laura Faust, by the way, believes that the Brony fandom would have been the Powerpuff Girls fandom if it had been an internet when the Powerpuff Girls came out, so this wouldn't have been the first time it happened. But because it started out fairly ironic, nobody actually cared about what was happening in the show. What they cared about was what they could make an image of to post on the internet to annoy people. So that's primarily where the initial point of the fandom started. You were getting pictures, people were putting pictures of the background characters and giving them backstories because they could. There's a character named Lyra, who is a green horse, who was sitting like a person, and she got an entire backstory about researching to human beings solely because she was sitting a bit funny, and people thought it would be hilarious to create that background. And a lot of characters who ended up getting stuff like that, that is considered almost as canon as the stuff that's happening in the show. And that's kind of where we're going to be going from here. The interesting part about the Brony fandom is because it started off ironically with people creating this material that had nothing to do with the show, and that's been in existence for so long. That material that's been created out of nothing, related to nothing, has the same level of legitimacy to the fandom that actual show material does. And fans will spend time trying to work around the fact that this bizarre, sort of self-sustaining, ironic fandom clashes with the show, and they'll try and fit it in using quite a lot of work, just because everyone loves the fact that the fandom made up all these characters, and then Hasbro took a lot of the names and a lot of the things that they made and stuck them on as official merchandise. So what makes this fandom weird and quite unusual, particularly with the fanfic, is that someone who goes on the internet and writes 1,500 words about how this horse likes a thing has as much legitimacy as an actual fully produced episode to some people. So, Reva, why don't you take us through music?
Thanks, DeadlyReg. Okay, I don't do a lot of public speaking. I'm much more at home with a guitar in my hand, so we'll see how we go here. I'm sorry if I make an absolute mess of this. Brony music, just like the fandom itself, started out as a bit of a parody. The first example of music within the fandom was actually taking pre-existing well-known sort of pop and rock songs and playing them over clips of the show as characters were either singing them in humorous ways or as sort of action character comedic sort of montages. From that, the most popular original works of art were actually, again, in around 2010, 2011, easily recognisable dialogue from the show has been remixed in two specific ways, either remixing songs from the shows, because there are actually quite a lot of musical numbers within the show and people will take them and put different music to them and things like that, and actually taking individual lines and words spoken by the characters, chopping them up and mixing them in some really quite strange ways, which, I mean, you heard a few examples of that with the video that we played at the start. The most popular kind of pony-related music today would probably be dubstep and rather full-on electronica. It's the most popular to make because for people who may not have had as much of a formal introduction to music, it's a little bit easier to get into rather than other genres because you don't need to, say, learn to play a guitar per se or have to spend money buying that sort of equipment. And it's one of the most popular, another reason it's one of the most popular kinds of music to the fandom is because there's a background character called Vinyl Scratch or DJ Pone 3, and this character is widely agreed upon to be a very full-on electronica or dubstep musician, and again, the picture of this character, this character very much sort of represents music for the majority of the entire fandom. The second reason a lot of people who may not be as heavily involved in the fandom itself still very much love dubstep music, just simply due to the general age group of the majority of the fans falling between mid-teens and early 20s, very much being into the rave and party scene, still on the forefront of their minds, and even though they may not be as much into the show itself, will still very much seek out dubstep music because that's the kind of music they love to listen to. And also due to the remix culture that launched the music side of the fandom in 2010-2011, the audio splicing and dubstep music are a fairly natural transition and fuse together quite well. So many of the fans from 2010-2011 music scene continue to stick around for the more modern dubstep era regardless of whether or not they're heavily into the rave or party scene as well. So that's sort of a general summary of why I believe dubstep music is one of the most popular kinds in the fandom today. Also, all of the above reasons combined makes this a very popular choice of music for new artists to try to get into, to sort of try to make a big name for themselves, because there is a sort of large demand for dubstep out there, and it's the most popular sort of music around. Something else quite interesting about music throughout the sort of brony generations is that since it's been going since around 2010, we've actually seen a few generations of musicians sort of rise and then sort of either leave the fandom to pursue other projects, while other ones will sort of become much more popular. And I believe there's around 3 generations at the moment of sort of different brony musicians that were very popular at different times. Very early in the fandom you had people like Alex S, Pinkie Pie Spare, Wooden Toaster, and then sort of as those people moved on to other projects, we sort of had the generation 2 come up with like the Living Tombstone, Mando Pony, Acoustic Brony. And while those ones are still also around, it's sort of fading out into another 3rd generation which seems to be coming up, where sort of more unknown but still very talented musicians are sort of rising to take their place. People sort of like Forever Free Brony, Forest Drain, Feather, and yeah, that's a bit about sort of the different generations of musicians throughout the brony community. A minute ago I mentioned the very popular character of Vinyl Scratch. Vinyl Scratch is actually often paired with another musical background character called Octavia, be it comedically in different videos or as a romantic interest, with the way this fandom works sometimes. Unlike Vinyl though, Octavia is very well known for representing orchestral music. In various stories, works of art, etc., these two have a very typical sort of opposites attract dynamic going on. And whilst both of them are hugely popular characters within the fandom, both very strongly represent different genres of music. And it's a bit of a point of interest that while there is a fair bit of orchestral music out there, it's not as sort of popular to the general fandom as dubstep music. Sort of looking a little bit into this, since the cost of the programs required to write orchestral music or dubstep music are really quite similar when it comes down to it, and the skill level required for each of these 2 genres is, I suppose, debatable, except again very similar. The reason I believe it's widely not as popular as dubstep, despite how much everyone loves the character of Octavia, is simply because of what I said before about the general demographic of bronies being between mid-teens, late 20s, being very much into the rave scene, and simply orchestral music is not quite as sought after as dubstep. As the fandom started to become less of a sort of parody of itself as the years went on, musical genres and different songs actually started expanding pretty much to any kind imaginable, because originally starting out as different remixes of the show itself, people would be looking out for things like that and it's like, oh, I know that character, and like DeadlyReg said, sort of posting things just to sort of annoy people on the internet with different music and stuff like that, and it started becoming very credible in their own right. And as they did, a lot of people actually started coming to the fandom purely looking even just for the music. There's a lot of people I've talked to who say they don't like the show itself at all, and that they just come around looking for the different music. But since music started to become very credible in its own right, a lot of instrumental artists started popping up around the place with no lyrics or show dialogue whatsoever. So if a lot of these songs were played without an image of a pony or anything like that, that actually you would never recognise them as a pony song at all. Also, as the fandom started to grow beyond the parody stage, different works of creativity, be it music, drawings, fan fictions, etc., as they did all start to become very credible in their own right, and the fandom started being seen as this huge creative entity, a really beautiful thing happened where, or beautiful things started happening where different works of creativity started inspiring other creative aspects. I mean, we've got examples of songs which have been written which have inspired people to write stories about the themes that were sung about in the songs, or people have drawn a picture and someone's seen that and thought, wow, I could write a really amazing story about that, and sort of go off on that. So you start getting creativity building off creativity, and that's how the creative side of the fandom started to become really self-sustaining, even while the show wasn't running for the 8 or so month periods between each of the seasons. The fandom still was really strong with the different creative outlets. A good example of what I was mentioning before about creativity, inspiring creativity, is the song Rainbow Factory, which was released in August 2011, and then a fanfic was written again in 2011, except in November. The song was by someone named Wooden Toaster, and the fanfic was actually by someone called Aurora Dawn. And we actually showed a little bit of the song during the opening video as well.
But with that rather scary face of Twilight.
But yeah, I mean, based on what we've seen from the Brony music fandom over the past few years, we can be fairly confident that electronic will continue to be very popular. But it looks like other genres and more creative ideas influencing different projects are sort of coming to be, and I very much look forward to seeing how it continues to progress. And now I'm going to hand you over to Scribbler to talk about some fan fiction.
Right. Yeah, I'm Scribbler. I am a person who does silly voices on the internet.
Is that what we're calling ourselves now?
Yes, of course, yes. Before I start, I spot an Applejack. Can I have that Applejack just waving in the air? Woo!
Best poem.
Nice, good work, yes, best poem. Right, yeah, I do silly voices on the internet. I do fanfiction readings. I have written fanfiction for an incredibly long time, like an embarrassingly long time. I have been writing fanfiction. In the program it says there's over 470 fanfictions between us. No, that was me.
We don't write. She's the writer.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've come at this from the side of the fandom that I've been producing different fanfictions, different fan works for a very long time in various different fandoms. But I've been a fan of My Little Pony for, well, since I was in my cot, because I was a G1 fan, which doesn't make me very popular in certain circles. But yeah, I've been into ponies since I was a little tot. I'm currently approaching my 231st birthday, and I'm looking rather good for it. But when it comes to MLP, I got into the fandom via Cupcakes, which, as you saw up there, was that rather disturbing video with Pinkie Pie making amazing faces, animated by Mr. Davis, and had the buzzsaw, which DeadlyReg will start talking about in a moment when she deals with dark fic and grimdark areas of the fandom, and especially to do with fanfiction. I'm going to be dealing with more of a general sense of fanfiction, and also the legitimacy of fanfiction, not only within MLP, but sort of with fandom as a whole, but using MLP as a spearhead, if you like. So generally, what is fanfiction? Fanfiction is basically taking canon ideas or taking missing canon ideas and replacing them with your own, or adding to canon ideas, or writing basically stories about a show or a cartoon or a comic or whatever else it is that you are into, and putting your own spin on it by writing your own story. It is incredibly popular. I've been writing fanfiction since 2001 on fanfiction.net, or Pit of Voles as it is lovingly called. And I was not in a first generation then. Fanfiction has been actually going on since the 1960s and 1970s with the early fanzines for things like Star Trek, Doctor Who, fandoms that have maintained, fandoms that have been around a long time, often had their start in fanfiction. It was a way of fans of showing solidarity, of showing shared ideas, of building upon those shared ideas by having things printed in this once-a-month magazine. The dawn of the internet has simply made fanfiction much easier to do and much easier to produce, one would think. Yes, I will get into this in a moment. But yes, one more thing, it makes it easier to do. Everybody who has a laptop, who has a computer, who has a tablet, they come with word processors. Therefore, you would think, fanfiction, boy, I can do that. But why is it popular then? Well, one is that everybody can produce it, everybody wants to write a story, everybody wants to write a story of themselves with their favourite character. I know I've got lurking somewhere a fanfiction of me and David Tennant. It will never see the light of day, but I quite like it.
Oh, come on. Live reading.
Live reading.
Yes, fanfic reading, we need to do that.
Oh yeah, that's not going to happen. Don't expect that to happen. But yeah, I've lost my thread now. This may happen a lot, that I will just wander off point. You will love to learn my babbling as we go on from this. I tell you, you will love to learn to love my babbling. You will.
That's an order. No.
But as far as fanfiction within MLP goes, it has its own dedicated website of fanfiction.net, which is run by Nighty, who's based in London. A bit close to the mic. Oh, look, I'm still alive.
Not that close. Not that close. There you go.
I'm getting running commentary from the peanut gallery. Right, yeah. It has its own dedicated website of fanfiction.net, and it sort of moved beyond the early fandoms that I was involved in, which were kind of limited to fanfiction.net. Because it's got its own dedicated website, there has been an explosion of fanfiction within the Brony community. And there's been much more diversifying within that. Now, I'm sure that other fandoms have their own dedicated websites. I would be incredibly surprised if they didn't. But for MLP, which is the reason I'm talking, so that's obviously what I'm going to focus on, fanfiction has, because it has got this dedicated website, it has become subgenres within that. And some of those subgenres are more popular than the show itself. Now, for some people that might seem like it's very, very strange. There are some fans who have only ever read fanfiction or have come into the fandom from an area of fanfiction and never actually experienced the show itself, which would seem rather odd. But because there is this diverse area of stories, of wish fulfillment and ideas that the show, based on it being a Y7 show, based on it being designed for younger viewers, could not go to. And that is some of the appeal of fan fiction. If you have an author who's also very good, they can take you on stories and journeys that the show, the comics, anything that is actually from Hasbro or from DHX just could not touch upon, sometimes for very good reasons.
Adult themes.
Yeah, adult themes. Well, leave it there, yes, adult themes.
Yeah.
Yeah, not talking about that.
No.
Oh, this is all ages con. We can't talk about that kind of thing. That doesn't exist, clearly. But the question kind of raised itself that if fanfiction has been around for an incredibly long time, if it has been around since the 60s and 70s, does it have a place in a fandom like MLP? It may have this dedicated website. It may have lots of different songs and different comics and things based on fanfictions, but there is this air that fanfiction is not very well respected. This is not endemic of MLP. This is a fandom-wide problem. And
George R.R. Martin hates fanfiction.
Hates, loathes
it. Has gone on record to say that if he could, he would destroy every piece of Game of Thrones fanfiction that exists because he hates it and he thinks it's creatively bankrupt. So, Carolyn, tell us all about fanfiction.
But the fanfics, I love them.
You're awful at pep talks.
I'm not doing pep talks.
Right. So, based on this, fanfiction doesn't really have a good reputation. And when you think about why this might be, it is kind of the same for all fandoms. I talked earlier about word processors and things making it easier to produce fanfiction, and because of that, there does seem to be this sort of lowering of the skill set necessary to get into this part of fandom, or that is the wide perception. That if you have a word processor and you have an idea, boom, you can write a fanfiction. Thing is, it's not that simple. You can write a story, you can post it online, but it wouldn't be a good story. And this is where Sturgeon's law sort of comes into things. Now, Sturgeon's law, for those who don't know, is the idea that 10% of everything is brilliant, masterful, wonderful, and 90% of it is absolute rubbish. This is the same with fanfiction in all different fandoms. In MLP, because it is such an explosively big online fandom, that 90% becomes exponentially bigger. which means that if you go looking for an MLP fanfiction, you are much, much more likely to find something from that 90% rather than from the 10%. And if you find enough of them, which it's a big fandom, you're bound to find quite a few, there is this perception that therefore all fanfiction is a bit rubbish. It's also that fanfiction is a really personal thing. Spit into the mic. It is a really, really personal thing. People write their own stories, and in addition to this idea of the skill set being lowered, that you don't have to have the same skills as you would like a trained musician, or like somebody who's studied art for a very long time, somebody who has drama lessons and can act. Fanfiction itself, if you have a basic grasp of the English language and you kind of like a show, bada bing, bada boom, you're a fanficker. And like I said, it doesn't work that way. But because of that lowering of skill set, that makes me sound really arrogant, I'm not trying to be, by the way. It is this idea that fanfiction is largely wish fulfillment. I think 75% of all fanfics are inserts of the author within the world of the canon world that they are writing about. This is the same for My Little Pony. If you... Where am I getting it from? I got it from the Brony study. Thank you, which I was a part of. Trying to trip me up.
What were sources?
What are my sources?
What were sources?
You
What
need
name of
a
the-
cited page.
You didn't just come here and make stuff up. So
It's gotta be legit.
I'm not going to call myself...
I'm glad you didn't ask where I got mine from.
I didn't need to. You then just quoted 75%. Alright, carry on.
He's just jealous because I'm more famous than
Carry
him.
on. I have horse fame.
The horse fame.
Sure.
That horse fame.
Well,
Everybody
I have
wants that horse fame.
Right, scribble, come on.
See how I'm treated? Right, I've lost my thread now. Yes, talking about wish fulfillment, that a lot of fan fictions are self-inserts. They are written, a lot of them written by very young fans who write about themselves going on an adventure with Rainbow Dash. They become the best flyer. They write themselves as being a pony. They write themselves as being a human, transported to Equestria. It becomes something that is the kind of thing that you would find in a school project if you were asked to write about a TV show that you like. A lot of young students would write about being in My Little Pony, would write about being in Doctor Who and being the newest companion, write about being in Game of Thrones. But because of this is one of the major reasons why fanfiction is looked down upon. Even though there is a wealth of creativity within the fandom that goes largely untapped and unacknowledged because of that stigma, because of that stereotype. And as I said, that's not endemic of MLP, that's for all fandoms. I'm probably going way over time here. So MLP's fanfiction, working against this stereotype as well, also working within a large media-based fandom. MLP, you saw the videos. There's huge amounts of fan animation. There's huge amounts of music. There are large amounts of fan comics. There are lots and lots of whiz-bang-boom-bar fan works. And that's a technical term, whiz-bang-boom-bar. Quote me on that. But because of that, fan fiction, the written word, the oldest exclamation of fanish love that has existed since sort of the birth of fandom, does it have a place in that kind of world? How can writing a story compete with a fully animated 27-minute epic, like,
Double Rain Boom.
That would be the one, yes.
Double Rain Boom.
Double Rain Boom.
Snowdrop, Fall of the Crystal Empire.
Yeah,
Those are big animation projects.
Big animation projects. How does fan fiction compete with that? Well, I haven't got an answer, but I have got a theory of one thing that myself, TheLostNarrator, basically the reason a lot of us are here, is doing to sort of bring fan fiction into this newer digital age, and that is fan fiction readings. And that is the idea of people turning fanfictions into audiobooks and posting them online for other people to download. Now, as I said, I'm rather ancient, and I've been in different fandoms for a while. And I think it was 2008, I was in the Final Fantasy VII fandom. And there was a charity auction for a national disaster that had gone on in America. And this charity auction, one person asked for a reading, an audio reading of their fanfiction for Final Fantasy VII. And that was considered very, very odd. It was not considered an ordinary request. And the person who did it actually acknowledged afterwards they'd never been asked to do anything like that before, and they didn't reckon they were going to be asked to do it again. cut to 2012 when I started getting back into the Brony fandom as opposed to just being a casual MLP fan. And I started finding a lot more dramatic readers on the internet and posting things on YouTube. And this kind of struck me as this might be a way to bring fanfiction forward, to legitimize it, if you would. And that's where the idea started of not just doing audiobook readings of a plain one author reading a book of the kind that you might get off audible.com or anything like that, but actually going the full hog and adding music, adding sound effects, having a full cast reading of it. And that's the kind of thing that myself and Lost produce. And on my YouTube channel, there are, I think it's close to 200 readings at this point, all of them with full music, sound effects, and often with full casts. And this sort of way of bringing fanfiction forward and trying to bring it into this digital age while not losing what made it so popular and made it a mainstay of fandoms for so long. Because it has survived. It's probably going to keep surviving because I'll bet there's quite a few other David Tennant self-insert fictions out there. And as far as things go, fanfiction deserves its fair due. And in some small way, I hope that we do that. And with that, I shall stop my babbling, which you clearly have all loved, and hand over to the Lost Narrator and her American-style babbling.
I'm so American. What? I had to at least enter that way. So I'm the Lost Narrator. You guys can call me Lost. I do fanfic readings like how Scribbler does, except for myself, I'm a little bit more. I have more of a niche in the fanfic readings where I do mostly like dark fic readings. So there, yeah, let me get closer to the mic. It's in a lot of fandoms. The darker stuff isn't necessarily looked at. It's more or less like swept under the rug. You don't really acknowledge it as much. But in this fandom, though, particularly the MLP fandom, it's glorified. I can't talk.
The glory, the gore.
Yep, pretty much. So like to the point where if you talk to a brony who's in reading fan fiction, sometimes they'll say that Cupcakes is one of their favorite fan fictions. Cupcakes has a notorious rep in the fandom of being probably one of the worst fics, but at the same time, the gore factor is just so over the top that you just can't take it seriously. I did a fic reading of it on my channel where I actually got 2 VAs that sound close to canon with the sound effects, with the music, and a lot of people say that it's too real. So that's... It
is. Go and listen to it.
Yeah.
It's just, well, go and listen to it if you are of an age.
Yes, if you are of age, because I don't know, you shouldn't...
No babbies.
No babbies, no. But that's one of the reasons why I've noticed, like, for myself personally, I became a brony because I listened to Mr. Creepypasta. I had come from actually the Creepypasta fandom and video game fandom. But I had listened to Mr. Creepypasta's readings of Cupcakes and other types of various creepypastas. But I had listened to that and I was like, this is not MLB. What is this? This is not ponies and like all the happy and the bright colors. No, this is the complete opposite of that. A lot of people in the fandom come from that background where they're not necessarily exposed directly to the show or to 4chan, but they're exposed through another medium. One perfect example actually is the Fallout Equestria story, pretty much series, because there's several different branches of that. But Fallout Equestria, if you've played the Fallout games, pretty much what it is, it's a crossover fic between Fallout Equestria and MLP, but it follows the story of Little Pip, who is an OC, or an original character if you don't know what that means, where she basically goes through her adventures of the barren wasteland that is Equestria after, it's like nuclear apocalypse.
It's their equivalent of nuclear apocalypse,
Yeah.
where they drop mega spells on each other.
Pretty much.
And pretty much,
So
yeah.
everything is done. But it follows that, and a lot of people have come into the fandom because of that. Some of them have not even watched the show, but they know Fallout Equestria or Project Horizons, which is another, I think Project Horizons is a 1,000,000-word fic.
Yeah,
and
it's
Fallout
not
Equestria
finished yet.
is 600,000 words. So both of them are pretty long, they're pretty lengthy, and they both have their own legitimacy within the fandom and as a standalone fic. You don't necessarily have to know Fallout or MLP to enjoy both of those stories. But yeah, that's pretty much like one of the biggest reasons why a lot of bronies even come into the fandom is because of the darker stuff. And you're probably thinking, well, I'm throwing around the terms grim, dark, and dark fic. What are those terms? There is a big difference between dark fic and grimdark. A dark fic is pretty much a story that focuses more on darker tones, so like angst, torment, depression, violence, rage, all the negative ends of the spectrum. That is the complete opposite of the show. You would never think that those types of subjects would even be brought up, but because of the way that the fandom is, and because of the fact that most of the fans are of an older age, particularly us, we draw those types of stories and we enjoy them. But the thing about a dark fic, though, is that it can end on a positive note, or it can end happy. It doesn't necessarily have to have even the gore factor. It can be mostly psychological. There are a few fics that, between me and Scribbler, that we've read on our channels, that like Biblical Monsters is a prime example of a dark fic. Granted, it ends on a really bad note where Twilight dies, but it's... Spoilers, there's gonna be spoilers, there's so many spoilers. But it's still, it cuts away. You don't even see the actual death, but you know what's happening. Thank you for my warning. So there's that. There's another one of The Loosening of the Screw, which is about one of the big things about the fandom is that we like taking the background characters and we love giving them stories. And there's a particular pony, Screw Loose, who is known which episode?
She was in Read It and Weep. She was basically a background character who was a mental patient who barked.
And there's a complete story, a dark fic story of how she got her cutie mark, and it's heart-wrenching. It's so heart-wrenching, but it's still a good story. But it ends on a bad note as well. But a good example of a dark fic that ends on a positive note would be No One to Quit, which is basically R.D. gets kidnapped and tortured by loan sharks because of Applejack taking out a loan from the loan sharks. But at the end, Applejack saves Rainbow Dash. So it's a prime example of it. But on the other hand of it, there's also the grimdarks. Grimdarks are known within a lot of fandoms of being primarily gore, they're going to be some of the darkest stories that you're ever going to look at. And a lot of people that came from the creepypasta fandoms or any other fandoms that love horror or love those types of things usually are drawn to those stories. A prime example of those types of Cupcakes. Cupcakes is infamous for that. Rainbow Factory is another one that's really known for that, where it's pretty much you're getting the origin stories of how the rainbows are made, which is by killing fillies. So
mashing them up into rainbows.
Yes, you mash them up into rainbows. We already said there was going to be spoilers here. It's a fanfic. It's a fanfic panel. You should expect spoilers. Another one is the Silent Ponyville series, which is another crossover story between, if you've played the Silent Hill games or if you've seen the Silent Hill movies, they've taken that element and integrated it into MLP, where it's basically one of the main characters is going into a fog-covered Ponyville, pretty much, and they're dealing with their own psychological baggage. And all of those, and you have to wonder, why do bronies like this? Why do bronies like the dark stuff? It's because it is the exact opposite of what MLP is. If you look at the show, if you've even just taken maybe 5 minutes of the show, you notice that it's cheery, it's happy. Pinkie Pie's throwing parties, they're having tea parties, they're doing all this. And then there's the fandom that does the exact opposite, where ponies are killing each other and it's just complete opposite end. But I think us as humans, we like that type of stuff sometimes, as weird as that sounds. We like thinking that maybe that there's darker things within our own minds, and maybe through the fanfics, we kind of explore that. And then also too, within the fanfic readings, I mean, between me and Scribbler, we've done some dark fic readings, and I know on my channel, there's some of the most watched stuff because I'm adding in the gore sound effects, I'm putting in the voice actors, I'm putting in the music, and I'm creating a complete atmosphere of immersion. And I know I've gotten a lot of comments where I can't sleep at night. Why did you read this? Oh my gosh. And as bad as it sounds, I love those comments. Those make my day. Because I know I was able to get into someone's mind and make them realize that, hey, this could be possible. And yeah, I think that's pretty much, in most fandoms, they are very rare, as Scribbler said with the example with the Final Fantasy series. But within our fandom, they're becoming more and more prevalent. I know a lot of people say that me and Scribbler are kind of like the, I guess, the forefronters. I don't know. I don't.
We've been called spearheads, but I'm liking to think that that's a compliment, not just saying that we are pointy and sharp and people
Yes.
throwing us at people.
Though for me, that might be a compliment considering all the stuff I read. But there are a lot more readers coming out, and granted, they aren't necessarily doing the sound effects and everything, but they are at least coming out and reading the stories and actually trying to give them legitimacy to within the fandom or within anything. I know it's just one of those things that you have to really look at and understand that, hey, the fandom itself is going to go on all these random tangents, but within like the fanfic reading community, there is some sort of legitimacy to it.
Yeah, it is becoming more and more popular to produce fanfic readings, and more so than just one person reading into their laptop. It is becoming more and more that people are having high quality microphones or producing fanfic readings with full casts and music and effects and things. And quite frankly, I don't know about Lost, but I quite like looking at these. I'd quite like to have some competition.
Yeah, it's really easy to get into, to be honest. Like, it's just go for it. I mean, I know when I first started, I was using a Rock Band microphone and a pop filter, and I just went at it. And over the years, I've actually upgraded my mic setup. But, I mean, let's just go into it.
Yep.
So, and with that, we go to
one of the, we've talked about having full cast readings. We have someone
We actually
here.
have one of the VAs that we use for our fanfic readings.
This is itsannachloem.
Hello. Oh, hello. So, I have a game.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, all right then.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we have a bit of audience participation in this game.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, get excited.
So, yeah, Anna does voices, I do voices, and so does Scribbler. How are we doing this, Anna?
So, I need people to give me 3 numbers. We have a list of characters, and we have a list of situations. So it's a bit like
This is an
Ad-libs.
improv. And this might get really bad, but it's going to be fun.
If you choose to leave at this point, we would understand.
Is this an improv where horses will die?
It
Maybe.
might
We
happen.
need Applejack to lie.
Because you do love murdering horses.
I make no
How long is
apologies.
this game? We should have some questions.
We've got a couple of
I'm sure people are itching to ask us questions.
Oh,
Actually,
is there,
are you?
is there questions?
In fact, is there any questions from the audience about horses?
About
About cannibal horses and the silly people who voice them.
Over there. Okay? Yeah, it's not just
Okay.
horses. It's horses you can't fly proper.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the horse.
Sure.
It's all the the
The colts and fillies, the young ponies. Sorry.
So we have a clarification there from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the clarification.
No, there wasn't any sexism in it. They just kill everyone.
Would anyone like to ask us any questions about
Okay.
horses? We have questions about horses.
More about the panel, just the rather good video that describes any place we can download a copy of the
It'll be on your channel. It will be on your
It
channel.
will most likely be on my channel, which is TheLostNarrator on YouTube. Yeah, I'm so original. But yeah, it will most likely be on there probably when I get back to the States, though, because I have a few more days here before I head back. So, because I'm on
We've been
vacation.
exposing her to English culture.
Oh yeah, I've been exposed to so much English culture. It's amazing.
We've converted her to Jaffa cakes.
Oh my god, they're so good. They're so good. We don't get
And
those in the States.
And Battenbergs. Basically, we've just been shoving English sugar down
So
her.
much. I've been on so much sugar rushes. It's not even funny.
Yeah, so, my resident California, the 3 best things about England are Jaffa cakes, alcoholic ginger beer,
Oh, yeah.
and Battenberg. So you heard it here first.
Yep, you heard it here first.
Represent
Yep.
Britain.
Alright, do we have any questions that anyone would like to ask, or shall we...
Oh, there's one
Question at
there.
the back.
As far as I'm aware, Hasbro, that is kind of a rumour because Hasbro are not actually allowed to read fanfictions in any way, shape or form. There's a huge contingent of people who, on Equestria Daily, which is the sort of the premier blog for MLP fandom, they've done several different polls about where people come from, what sorts of fanfiction things and what sorts of fandom areas they specialise in. And a number of times, every time they do these polls, there's a large percentage who say, I cannot read fanfiction for legal reasons. And it does come back to they're not allowed to be influenced buy the fiction in case somebody could then claim copyright on an idea. Fan art and things, I'm not sure how that goes because they know that.
Yeah,
Oh, there we go.
I remember when they were doing Equestria Girls, they had binders and binders filled with human concepts from DeviantArt when they were trying to brainstorm for Equestria Girls, and then obviously with the animations, there's C&D and all over the place.
Which tweeted that she would like a picture of herself drawn as a horse as Daenerys Targaryen from horse Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones, I can imagine the name, with a dragon, and I think it was like 7 or 8 minutes, and she had half a dozen pictures.
Yep.
tweeted
So.
to her.
Which sort of lends this out to what I said before about fan fiction is not as well respected as other areas of the fandom because, partially also because Hasbro and DHX and people are allowed to look at the other things, they're not allowed to read fan fiction.
Yep.
Sad.
Right.
So there will be no actual Rainbow Factory dolls.
Sad.
Sad face.
So much sadness.
I don't want horses ground up.
I do.
Terrible shadows of the meat scandal.
Oh man.
Right, we've been told we've got 60 seconds. So
Say something as Celestia.
we want Anna to say something to
something to
Celestia.
Celestia.
She is the fandom Celestia. She gets asked to do this all the time.
Hello, my faithful students. I don't know what else to say.
Say your princess. Say the princess.
Say you love CamCon.
Say you love cakes.
Love Jaffa cakes.
Say you love Jaffa cakes. There we go.
I love Jaffa cakes.
Yes.
Woohoo!
Alright, that's pretty much all we got.
Yeah.
That seems like a rather good note to leave on. This sort of sums up what our panel has been about. Horses, messing about, and Jaffa cakes.
Yeah.
Hey.
We hope that you take that last impression of us with you.
Alright, kicked off. Alright.
Yes, and ground up fillies and colts.
Yeah.
Say you like Celestia.
And Rainbow. What?
Say
Celestia loves ground up horses.
I love ground up horses.
and with that, we bid you adieu.
Yep.
Bye bye.
Bye.
We are rather amazed you all stayed through that.